Pecha Kucha 253, Raphael's Wrath, and The Ultimates. So The Ultimates is a reboot of the Avengers from 2000s, one of the best superhero team books I've ever read. And I also tried to do a 7-page comic book, which was about Raphael from the Turtles, just to figure out how that kind of pacing works. So The Ultimates. It's the Avengers, but cool. I hate the Avengers from the 90s. This is the book that made the movies work. This is the reason the Marvel Universe, cinematic universe, is a massive success. It's written by Mark Miller, who I didn't realize is one of my favorite bloody writers until this week. One of the strange things about The Ultimates is there's a lot of celebrity name dropping and visual reference. Bush, I don't think they asked the president's permission to use him as the president within the confines of this story, or Samuel L. Jackson, but he ended up playing Nick Fury in the movies as a result of them referencing him in the comics. And the first book, The Ultimates, are created, but they have no one to fight, and they end up fighting the Hulk, and it turns into a scandal in the third book. In the second book, because all good comic books have to hotshot, they end up fighting a monstrously large alien invasion and losing until they win. Bonus points to how this book represents the Norse god Thor. He is outrageously powerful, but because the book is so inherently cynical and everyone in it is inherently cynical, no one actually believes he's a god. They just use him as like a super weapon against an unwinnable opponent. And then in the third book, The Ultimates 2, that I have in order, Gods and Monsters, the fact that no one believes Thor is Thor comes to a head, and they believe he's a danger to himself because he's mentally ill, and the Avengers, the Ultimates, they attack and defeat Thor, giving us such class lines as, sorry chum, you're nuts and you're going down, from Captain America, because he's a straight shooter. The art is fantastic, the writing is fantastic, the characters are believable. This is the kind of thing you can sell to normal people. If comics were like this, they'd be mainstream like they were in the goddamn 70s. Also sell them at newsagents again. And make them cheap. I was also looking at a how to draw manga book I have, where I have a very low opinion of it, and I was like seeing if I could produce better manga characters than the author could without reference. It's an ego thing, and I'm probably not putting in any more effort than he is when he's doing these. The guy can draw manga characters, it's just the quality of the book ebbs and flows dramatically. I'll talk about the book specifically at a later date. It's not as bad as I remember, but as I was messing around with the G-Pen, I was kind of experimenting with single layer illustration techniques, so I could like sketch it in the wrong color and then just literally apply black on top. Not a sensible thing to do, but I mean, when you're just trying to bang out sketches real quick, I found it to be an interesting thing. So the 7-page comic I was doing, I started with this idea. It didn't really matter what it was. The point was to just do a 7-page comic and see how it felt, what I could learn from it. Because 2000 AD has 7-page comics. It's definitely possible to get a lot done. So I just started with Raphael on a rooftop looking pissed. He's been in a fight and he's chased this guy down, and now I have to figure out, as I'm telling the story, what the story is. And this is, it's halfway through the second page is the first time I get hit with writer's block, because instead of me drawing pictures and then doing the words, I'm now using the words to I'm trying to script this based on the logical progression of what has been said, and then the actions follow the thinking processes of Raphael and the guy called Jakey who he's chasing down. So Raphael's been betrayed by this guy, but what that betrayal is, I have to figure out, and then I have to show it, and then I have to wrap this up in 7 pages. So on the third page, which I think is the only page that's visually dynamic after the first, and I was messing around with paneling as well. Raphael stops the guy from falling off the roof by grabbing him by his tie. And I think at this point I took a break, because I was like, this is a lot, but I need to think about it. So I started doing a second comic where like the Joker wants to say something. I was actually going to have him talk about how White Knight isn't canon, the book, and how he'd never act like that. because it's fan fiction and it's Joker fan fiction. And like Harley Quinn is holding the camcorder while the Joker's trying to make this public address. And it's just me trying to get back into the habit of actually paneling comics and making visual narratives that can be understood with and without words, which is a lot more work than I usually do every week. Did drawing the Joker so much in headshots improve how I draw the Joker? Yes and no. I'm still really heavily leaning on the animated adventures, the cartoon Joker, for a lot of my visual identity for him. And that's fine because I think that's how I want to do it. But, you know, later on in the week, I got back to this Raphael's Raph thing. And, you know, I wasn't going to do it, but then I decided to work in a flashback to Raphael getting ambushed on the docks wearing that infamous costume disguise that the Turtles used to wear in the cartoons, where they just wore a trench coat and a rubber mask. And then, like, there was so much information I needed to pack into one page. I just did this kind of thought bubbles coming out of Raphael's head. It's a visual experiment. I don't know if it works. It's not readable, but that's really because every thumbnail sketch is a little too vague. I know what it is, but it's not an easy thing to read for you. And then, of course, the conclusion is rushed because I'm trying to fit in I'm trying to not rush the dialogue, but there are certain things I want to visually show, and it is actually very, very difficult to balance. It's an excellent learning experience. I do have the ability to edit what I've done because it's just a first draft. There is obvious wiggle room, and I'm going to spend some part of this next week seeing if I can do a second draft revise, because now I actually have the story. Now it's about the rendering, and it's also about that word when you composition, like how I actually break the images down per page, and how I paste the thing. So yeah, that's an encouraging thing. That's the end of Pecha Kucha 253, and I will see you next time.